Jai Gurudev, so what role does satsang play in the preservation of Kannada culture, and can you provide an example where satsang has directly impacted a community's relationship with its heritage? Yes, Jai Gurudev, satsang is a transformative practice because it provides an environment where the spiritual essence of our traditions comes alive. In Kannada culture, satsang often involves devotional singing, discussions of literature, and spiritual wisdom, which are deeply embedded in the culture of Karnataka. Let me give you an example. In Mangalore, we started a Kannada satsang series that combined devotional songs and bhajans with discussions of Kannada spiritual poetry. The community, which was largely made up of young professionals and families, had become increasingly disconnected from these practices due to the fast paced lifestyle and modern influences. After the Kannada satsang sessions, where we sang devotional songs of Purandara Dasa and Kanak Dasa, the two great Kannada saints and poets, the community started experiencing an emotional and spiritual awakening. One participant, Lakshmi, a young mother who had attended several sessions, said, I always heard these bhajans at my grandparents' house, but it was only during the satsang that I felt the true depth of their meaning. The connection to Kannada culture is now something I experience daily, not just in my mind but in my heart. Satsang, when performed in Kannada, does not only preserve the language but also reinvigorates the spiritual and cultural emotions tied to that language. The effect is both intellectual and emotional, leading to a profound connection with the Kannada traditions. How can Ayurveda and Ayurvedic cooking help in preserving Kannada cultural traditions? And what impact has this had on individuals and communities in Karnataka? Yes, Ayurveda is an integral part of our cultural identity, especially in Karnataka, where traditional diets have been deeply influenced by Ayurvedic principles. The connection between food, body, and mind is so strong in Kannada culture, and Ayurveda teaches us how our food can be healing, balancing, and nourishing not just for the body but for the mind and soul. At Art of Living, we conduct Ayurvedic cooking workshops where participants learn to prepare traditional Kannada recipes while understanding their Ayurvedic significance. These workshops have been incredibly impactful, especially in rural communities where traditional cooking practices were fading away in favor of processed foods. For example, in a village near Kur, we held an Ayurvedic cooking for wellness program. The locals were taught how to prepare dishes like neer dosa, ragi madal, and saru, or a traditional soup, but with an Ayurvedic twist. We focused on ingredients that balance the doshas, like turmeric, ginger, and cumin, and explained how they contribute to digestive health, mental clarity, and emotional stability. One local Prakash farmer shared, I've been cooking the same meals for years, but I never understood the healing aspect behind them. Now I use these foods not just to fill my stomach, but to heal myself and my family. We feel more energized and less stressed. This approach of combining Ayurvedic cooking with Kannada cultural practices not only revives local culinary traditions but also brings mental and emotional wellness to the forefront. People begin to appreciate their native foods in a more profound, holistic way. What about the specific role of yoga in reviving Kannada language and literature? Can yoga influence the creative process, particularly for those involved in writing poetry or other forms of literary expression? Absolutely, yoga has a profound impact on creativity, especially for those involved in literary pursuits like writing or poetry. The practices of pranayama, breathing exercises, sudarshan kriya, and meditation not only calm the mind but also open up creative channels that are often blocked due to stress or mental clutter. When the mind is calm and clear, it becomes an ideal space for the expression of Kannada creativity. In fact, several poets and writers in Kannada have shared how their practice of yoga has deeply influenced their writing. One example is Ravi, a young Kannada poet from Hubli, who was struggling with writer's block after attending a yoga for a creativity workshop. He said that through meditation and pranayama, I felt the flow of energy in my body. The words and the poems I had been struggling to write for months began to come naturally. We also invite Kannada authors and poets to participate in yoga retreats where they engage in deep relaxation and mindfulness practices. They often share that the stillness of yoga allows them to tap into deeper layers of creativity. For example, during a recent yoga retreat in Hampi, one participant, Niranjan, an aspiring Kannada poet, created a collection of poems inspired by the ancient temples and landscapes of Hampi, saying, it was the most creatively inspiring experience of my life. This illustrates that yoga isn't just about physical health, it's about mental clarity and spiritual connection, which are essential for those who wish to preserve and evolve Kannada literature in contemporary times. What can the future hold for Kannada language and culture with the Art of Living programs and the continued wisdom of His Holiness Gurudev Shri Shri Ravi Shankarji. Jagodev, yes, the future looks very bright with Art of Living's emphasis on spirituality, mindfulness, and self awareness. Combined with the deep rooted traditions of Vedic culture, we are already seeing a revival of Kannada heritage among the younger generations through practices like Sudarshan Kriya, Satsang, Ayurvedic cooking, and yoga. We are offering a holistic approach to preserving and nurturing Kannada culture in modern times. His Holiness Gurudev Shri Shri Ravi Shankar Jesus' wisdom, when applied to cultural preservation, allows for the perfect blend of ancient tradition and modern relevance. In the years to come, we aim to see Kannada language being spoken with pride, its literature being celebrated in both academic and creative circles, and its spiritual practices being lived in everyday life. Programs like these will continue to create a bridge between the younger generation and their cultural roots, ensuring that Kannada is not just a language but a living, breathing part of everyone's life. Thank you for your insightful answers. Any final thoughts you would like to share on this important topic? Thank you. I believe that preserving a culture is not just about saving the language, but about living it, feeling it, breathing it, and sharing it with others through art of living. We have the unique opportunity to revitalizing it, not just the language of Kannada, but the spirit behind it. If we can create a sense of connection to our cultural roots while staying relevant in the modern world, Kannada will continue to thrive in the hearts of future generations. Let's keep the wisdom of the past alive through practices like Sudarshan Kriya, Satsang, Ayurveda, and yoga, and ensure that the rich heritage of Kannada culture is passed on in a way that is meaningful, impactful, and timeless. It's been a pleasure to have this enlightening conversation. Thank you for your time and valuable insights. Jai Gurudev, and thank you for having me. It's always an honor to share the message of peace, wisdom, and cultural preservation. Jai Gurudev. Jagodev, we have discussed the impact of spiritual practices on Kannada culture. Now, could you tell us how Ayurvedic cooking aligns with preserving not just the language but the local traditions and ecosystems of Karnataka? Absolutely. Ayurvedic cooking in the context of Kannada culture is deeply rooted in the local ecosystem and traditional agricultural practices. Ayurveda teaches us to understand the relationship between food and the body's natural rhythms, and much of this wisdom is linked to what is grown locally. In Karnataka, we have a rich history of cultivating ingredients that are naturally suited to the region's climate and soil: ragi, millets, rice, tamarind, coconut, and an abundance of medicinal herbs. By focusing on Ayurvedic cooking, we are not only preserving the local flavors of Kannada cuisine, but also protecting the environment. Traditional farming methods are more aligned with sustainable agriculture, ensuring that the land remains fertile for future generations. For example, in a program we conducted in Kur, we focus on how foods like mee dosa, or rice, crepes, and ragi roti or finger millet flat breads can be modified for modern health needs without losing their essence. We also highlighted how these foods can help to balance doshas or body energies and align with the Ayurvedic understanding of the seasons, encouraging people to eat foods that grow locally in harmony with nature. The impact on local farmers has been significant as well. By incorporating Ayurvedic principles, they have become more conscious of the holistic health benefits of their crops provide. This has led to a revival of organic farming, protecting the land from chemical fertilizers and pesticides. So, Ayurvedic cooking isn't just about food, it's about revitalizing the ecosystem of Karnataka, preserving ancient agricultural knowledge, and ensuring that the future generations inherit a sustainable, healthy, and culturally rich environment. Jaydev. That's a great point about the environment. So now, how do pujas and homas play a role in preserving not just spiritual traditions but also Kannada cultural practices? Could you share a real example where these rituals have contributed to the cultural preservation of Karnataka? Yes, Jagat, the pujas and homas are central to the spiritual and cultural fabric of Kannada communities, particularly in rural areas. These rituals have been passed down through generations, and they carry profound significance in terms of spiritual purification and connecting to the divine. But more than that, just being spiritual practices, they are also acts of cultural preservation and Kannada tradition. The rituals associated with pujas and homas often involve Kannada mantras, shlokas, and traditional Kannada hymns that are sacred to the region's history and customs. For instance, in Udupi, we organized a Kundalini Homa where the mantra for the Homa was recited in Kannada, focusing on its spiritual meanings and emotional impact. The event attracted not just spiritual seekers but also Kannada scholars who came to see how the Kannada language could still be a living force in Vedic practices. What was profound about this event was how it brought together two seemingly separate communities, one that practiced the ritual for spiritual growth and the other that was keen on conserving and preserving Kannada culture through its language and literature. During the ceremony, we discussed the significance of each Kannada shloka and the context in which they were written. The fusion of spirituality and cultural education left participants with a deep understanding of how connected their spiritual practices were to their language and how these rituals can be used as a medium for cultural transmission. Moreover, the younger generation, especially students who had been losing touch with their roots, were greatly inspired to explore the Kannada language in the context of spiritual practices. One teenager named Ravi, who had been interested in pujas or Kannada traditions, was moved by the experience. He said, I realized that the language of Kannada isn't just for literature, it's a language of our ancestors' wisdom and our spiritual traditions. So the pujas and homas are not just sacred rituals, they are our living traditions that keep Kannada culture alive in the hearts of people. So, how do the practices like Upanayana and Gayatri Japa Sadhana, especially in the context of Kannada speaking communities, contribute to not only individual spiritual growth but also the preservation of Kannada heritage? Yes, Upanayana and the sacred thread ceremony is a deeply significant ritual in the life of a young individual. Traditionally, this ritual marks the initiation into formal education and spiritual learning. It's usually performed in Sanskrit, but in the context of Kannada speaking communities, we can see the beauty of the Kannada language in the prayers, mantras, and the spiritual teachings passed down through generations. At the Art of Living, we have re-emphasized the importance of Upanayana in the Kannada context, helping young students realize the deep connection between spiritual education and cultural identity. When we conduct Upanayana ceremonies with a focus on Kannada spiritual teachings, we not only introduce them to the Sanskrit mantras but also include Kannada prayers and songs fostering a sense of pride in their cultural heritage. This approach connects spiritual knowledge with their native language, grounding them in both their spiritual and cultural roots. The Gayatri Japa Sadhana, particularly when performed in Kannada, can be an incredibly powerful practice. The Gayatri Mantra itself is universal, but reciting it in the native language brings it to life in a way that resonates with the individual's soul. In Kannada speaking regions, people feel more connected when these ancient Vedic chants are recited in the language they understand. We have also taught participants to incorporate the Gayatri Japa practice as part of their daily routine, and many report experiencing a deeper levels of inner peace and a closer connection in their cultural and spiritual heritage. An example is a community program we conducted in Shimoga, where we guided a group of young school children through the practice of Gayatri Japa in Kannada. The parents shared that their children felt a deep sense of attachment and pride when they realized that these spiritual practices were their own part of their cultural inheritance. The combination of Upanayana, Gayatri Japa, and other spiritual practices in Kannada ensures that spirituality and cultural wisdom are passed on together, creating a living tradition for future generations. In terms of creative expression, how do you see the integration of practices like Shakti Kriya, Sudarshan Kriya, and Satsang influencing Kannada literature, art, and music, particularly in the younger generation? Yes, the fusion of spiritual practices like Shakti Kriya and Sudarshan Kriya with the Kannada literature, art, and music opens up new avenues for creative expression. These practices not only help individuals attain mental clarity and inner peace, but they also free up the mind to explore deeper creative potential. For instance, Sudarshan Kriya is a powerful tool for clearing emotional blockages which can often hinder creative thinking. Once these blockages are cleared, the individuals become more receptive to new ideas and inspired to express themselves in new ways. Whether it's through Kannada poetry, painting, or music, we have seen remarkable transformations in the young Kannada artists after attending satsang programs where they learn to express their inner emotions through artistic forms. For example, Deepika, a young artist from Bengaluru, said after attending a satsang workshop, I used to struggle with expressing myself through my art. After practicing Shakti Kriya and meditating on my emotions, I felt an explosion of creative energy. My latest Kannada poem captures my inner transformation. One of the best examples of this creative synergy was seen In a recent Art of Living Satsang event where Kannada folk singers performed traditional songs interwoven with the practice of Sudarshan Kriya, the audience felt a deep sense of unity between the spiritual practice and the artistic performance, creating a living, breathing experience of Kannada culture. These practices allow the younger generation to engage with their culture in a way that's dynamic and modern, ensuring that Kannada art and literature continue to evolve while staying rooted in its spiritual traditions. Jai Gurudev.